Star Trek Deep Space Nine is without a doubt my favorite Star Trek series. Unlike any Star Trek until the modern era, it very much had an ongoing storyline that was vital to the power of the show. Events in one episode would have an impact on future episodes, sometimes a profound impact. That past would shape the future. A key piece of the whole series was the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. One of the major characters in Deep Space Nine was Major Kira Nerys. She fought against the Cardassian occupation of Bajor and was labeled a terrorist for it. Right now seems like a good time to go into the background of this event. For 50 years, the Cardassians occupied Bajor and created many rights violations against the native people.
One man's villain is another man's hero, Captain. You should see the monument they're erecting in my honor at the gateway to the Imperial Plaza.
Cardassians have been confiscating land from the Bajoran people over the decades, forcing the Bajorans to live in less and less humane ways, forcing more of them in less area with less resources, and sometimes just outright killing them. The Cardassians saw Bajor as their promised land, and the Bajorans as inferior, so they were able to take over the planet rather easily. There would be battles fought over this, but battles the Cardassians could win, typically ending up in a stronger position than they were before. One time, after work, a Cardassian rammed his shuttle through a Bajoran worksite, killing 4 of them. This started non-violent protests that quickly turned violent.
We can't have these Bajorans running around murdering each other, now can we? I'm talking about order here, justice. There's very little justice in the Cardassian occupation of Bajor.
In this chaos, about 150 Cardassians were killed and over 1,000 Bajorans. A new agreement was made between the Cardassian people and the Bajorans, overseen by the Federation. This ended up giving the Bajorans a bit more of the land they lost. There was hope that this deal would give the Bajorans a definite hold over part of their planet.
I'm well aware that among the Bajoran population, there is a perception that all Cardassians are to be feared, that we are a cruel and heartless people. I hope to change that.
This did not happen. The peace would not be maintained. There had been a traditional agreement during this time that while Cardassia gave Bajor peace, they would gradually be rewarded with land. Eventually, the Bajorans decided they didn't like this deal and thus protested. If that wasn't enough, a Bajoran suicide bomb killed 30 Cardassians. Violence broke out again. This time over 1,000 Cardassians would die and nearly 5,000 Bajorans. The weakening of the Bajorans' political strength led to the rise of a more extreme faction that believed Cardassia had no right to the planet, and therefore coexistence was impossible. Despite this, a temporary peace happened, where an attempted 2-race planet was negotiated. However, they couldn't agree on all the details, and the entire deal fell through. Bajorans would instigate guerrilla-style fights with the Cardassians, which eventually resulted in the Cardassians bombing a central Bajoran city and killing almost 15,000 Bajorans, 2/3 of which were civilians. This is when the Federation stepped in and agreed to start giving Cardassia significant military aid for 10 years. This would come to the equivalent of $38 billion by the U.S.'s current metric.
A true victory is to make your enemies see they were wrong to oppose you in the first place. To force them to acknowledge your greatness.
The Federation also declared Cardassia the only recognized owner of Bajor, to the complete dismay of the Bajoran people. Most recently, Cardassia has begun forcing Bajorans from their homes and claiming this new land as theirs. This has led to attacks on both sides. The Cardassians have a far greater military might, and their defenses are nearly impossible for the Bajorans to penetrate. Meanwhile, the Cardassians are free to attack the Bajorans with ease. The story of the Cardassian-Bajoran conflict is largely that of a much more powerful force using that power to subjugate a much weaker force that can do little to stop it.
Cardassia will be made whole. All that we have lost will be ours again, and anyone who stands in our way will be destroyed.
Now I have a confession. I lied to you. This is not the history of the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. This is the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict.
In the dark of another long night in Gaza, a desperate search for signs of life. A 4-story building in a densely packed refugee camp hit repeatedly, according to eyewitnesses, and razed to the ground. The rescue operation was frantic, yielding only a catalogue of death. 2 families obliterated, at least 7 people, including 5 children, aged from 5 to 14. Mohammed Hadidi has lost almost everyone. His wife, Maha, and the children were staying with her brother when the missile struck. Little Omar is all he has left, found in the rubble next to his mother. Images released overnight display an operation that shows no sign of letting up. Israel says it's up to Hamas to stop firing first. That's not happening either. This, the aftermath of a rocket attack in the city of Beersheba. The rockets are, as always, indiscriminate. This is a solemn day across the Palestinian territories. In Ramallah, on the West Bank, sirens sounded to mark the 73 years since the creation of the State of Israel and the dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. On the streets of Israel's mixed cities, where Jews and Arabs live side by side, uneasy quiet this morning after nights of shocking violence. This is Jaffa, scene of fresh disturbances last night, now almost deserted. Fear and hatred tugging away at the fabric of Israeli society. Paul Adams, BBC News, Jerusalem.
You know, when I see the images and videos of destruction and death in Palestine, all I hear are the children screaming from pure fear and terror. I want to read something a mother named Iman in Gaza wrote 2 days ago. She said, quote, "Tonight I put the kids to sleep in our bedroom so that when we die together." And no one would live to mourn the loss of another one. The statement broke me a little more because of my country's policies and funding will deny this mother's right to see children live, her own children live without fear and to grow old without painful trauma and violence. We must condition aid to Israel on compliance with international human rights and end the apartheid. We must, with no hesitation,